Okay, so it's actually a real pleasure and an honour to be invited by Neil to TED. And in a way, I kind of struggled to put my presentation together. And I think one of the reasons was that TED really makes you have to take a step back and really look at the bigger picture. And I go to a lot of music industry conferences. Everybody seems to be talking about this thing, the future of music. And future music is a bit kind of cliched. I mean, we're always talking about future this, future that. In fact, my hotel I'm in is called the Future Inn, and it's not particularly futuristic, but that's not the point. So with the future of music, it's something that we're always talking about, just the same way that we talk about the future of journalism or the future of photography or the future of this. And what I've found is that actually most of the time when I'm talking to people about the future of the music, we're actually just talking about the future of the music industry. And to be honest, it gets quite boring because we're just talking about the music industry that we've known for the last year. And because it's an industry event, we're just talking about the implications for the industry and who's making money and things like that. So what I wanted to talk about today is something that I think is a bit more interesting. It's a future that could potentially involve all of you. And it's a future that's very exciting. It's a future where everybody could be a music maker. Okay, but before I take a look at the future, I think it's important also to look at the past. And I want to take you back just over 100 years to the birth of the music industry, as illustrated very nicely on that photo that I found. And really, arguably, the music industry actually was created when Thomas Edison invented the phonograph. And that was actually the very first time that anybody could record, distribute, copy an actual piece of music performance. And that couldn't be done before. Before that time, if you wanted to enjoy music, if you wanted to interact with music, if you wanted to have a musical experience, you had to seek out somebody else that made music. Or you picked up an instrument, a banjo, a piano, or you went down to your local pub and joined in with them, or you sang in a choir, and you created your own music. And actually, before the birth of this music industry, the biggest industry we had was the sheet music industry, where it was the songwriters of the day saying, right, here's my song, now you go and play it. And there was this real breed of professional songwriters, but amateur people who played their creations. And it's interesting to see, as soon as we were able to record a piece of music, it suddenly marked this massive shift. And over the last 100 years, it's all been about consumption of music. All the technological changes, all the big advances in music have all been based around making it easier for us to listen, to consume other people's music. And it's created a multi-million-pound industry along the way. But it's interesting to think, just to stop and have a look, we've had 100 years of consuming music. We've now got so far that in my pocket I have a device, my iPhone, and I've got an app called Spotify. Now, I can at any time, anywhere, any place, and for an incredibly low price, listen to any piece of music that I want. Now, where do we go after that? I mean, you can't really do much more than that. For me, my iPhone has really represents the pinnacle of music consumption. But during this talk, I just had to kind of stop and take a look. Technology changes things. It's always changing things. In 1877, Thomas Edison changed things. And I think that something really, really big is about to happen. I think something that probably is about as big as 1877 when Thomas Edison invented the phonograph. And I'm going to talk about it a bit later, but I think that this guy in the slide might be the Thomas Edison of the 21st century. Okay, but just a bit of background first of all into why I think things are changing. First of all, I mean, the 20th century, consumption was pretty big, and it wasn't just for music, it was for all types of media. And we've grown up, we've just been consuming things, we watch TV. But then the new generation coming through, they don't accept that media is a one-way street. For them, it's just simply not. Consumption is boring. Consumption is just so last century. And I think we're only beginning to see a new generation of creators. So whereas we watch TV, they're making TV. We make mixtapes, they're making mashups. We watched MTVs. We sat back in our couches, watched MTVs. These guys are making their own videos. And I wanted to show an example. The kid in the slide there, he's 8 years old. I don't know if you've got any 8-year-olds in your Inspiration Found, but he would be a good example. Now, he effectively has his own TV channel. He has his channel on YouTube. And I went there while I was making this talk just to kind of get a feel for what these kids are doing nowadays. And actually, I was quite shocked. This video here is my nephew. He's called James. It's him making his own video of Calvin Harris's Girls. And it's not just karaoke, it's actually his own creation. It's got lip syncs, it's got dance routines, it's got special effects, it's got edits, it's got cutaways. Now this kid is 8 years old. For him, consuming TV or consuming music videos is just boring. It's not what he wants to do. Consumption is so easy, he's moved on to actually being a creator. And then I suddenly realized, well, yeah, this is kind of happening with all the other forms of media. So, you know, we accept that everybody can be a filmmaker. We accept that everybody can be a photographer. And then, you know, with blogs, things like that, everybody accepts that everybody can be a journalist or a writer or a presenter. But for some reason, we have a real problem with accepting that everybody can be a music maker. And I think it probably goes back to the last century, back to the birth of the music industry. Before that time, we didn't have this problem, but during those 100 years, somehow we've had it drummed into us that making music is for professionals. It's something that professionals did. A record label can come along, they can get the best singer, the best songwriter, the best backing band, they can put a budget behind it, and then all of a sudden you've got this perfect piece of music, and that's designed for people to consume. And yeah, I mean, fair enough. Making music is quite hard. I mean, it's not as easy as just taking a photo or maybe even editing a movie. But I think this is about to change. What you can see behind me is Magic Piano, and for me this really represents a new wave of things that's happening. And it's not just about making music instruments cheaper or making virtual instruments or putting music sequences on in your browser or on your iPad even. It's actually about making a whole new generation of instruments and tools of which people can create music. And this example, this is on the iPad. I mean, this is not a piano. This isn't a traditional music making tool. But it's fun. Anybody can use it. My kid could use it. I could use it, and it would still be fun, and it would still be worth doing. It's playful. That's something that instruments haven't really had before. I learned to play piano when I was 7. It was so that I gave up when I was 14 and only just started learning again. And even if you can't play piano, you can jump straight in. It has a kind of a play, kind of game-like element to it as well, where you can actually play along to some of the greats that I had to learn in a very boring way, like Moonlight Sonata or Für Elise. And then last of all, which really ticks the boxes for this new generation of creators, it's social. It's got a worldview where I can just click on the iPad, go to the world. I can hear anybody playing music anywhere in the world at that point in time. And then what's even more incredible, I can actually have a duet. I can invite them to a duet, and we can make our own music together. This ticks a lot of boxes. And I think really this is just the tip of an iceberg. This is just the Magic Piano. That's just one example. That was actually built in 2 months just to hit the ship date of the iPad. Now, if that could be built in 2 months, imagine what can be built in 2 years. Imagine what can be built in 20 years. But who cares? I mean, these are just, you know, tinklings on a piano. This isn't meaningful music. This isn't the music that we understand and that we consume today. But I would argue that it is meaningful. It might be an amateur creation, but let's take an example that we all know and love. I bet most of the people in this room can remember the first time that they made a mixtape for somebody, probably for a girlfriend or someone you had a bit of crush on at school. Now, actually, making the mixtape was almost a selfish act. You enjoyed it. You got all of your records out. You worked out which ones you want to put on. You chopped and changed the orders. It was a lot of fun just creating it. But then actually it was the act of sharing it that made it meaningful. But now we don't have to make mixtapes. We can make our own music creations. And again, with these, sharing the piece of music makes it meaningful. I might not enjoy it, but for the person you're sharing to, it might have a lot of relevance. And this is a really interesting example, actually, a direct comparison to the mixtape example. This is an iPhone company called RJDJ who make interactive music apps. And what they've done is they teamed up with Air. You can actually record your love message and you can send it to somebody. That is actually an act of creation. You're changing the music, you're adding your own elements to it. Now, it might be a bit of a whimsical example, but it's a really good point in case. Now, you can actually hear a lot of these recordings. I was going to play one on stage, but quite frankly, they're extremely cringeworthy. You do not want to hear these pieces of music. But for the person who created them and for the person who received it, this is exceptionally meaningful. Okay, but is it really a big thing? I mean, these things are great. I've put up a few examples, the Magic Piano and the Air app. You know, are these things just toys? Is it just a fad? You know, is this just something that kind of music geeks or iPhone geeks like to do? Well, I would argue that this is actually something that's really quite big. And I was amazed when I saw these figures. And I thought it was really interesting to put a comparison and stack them up next to each other. So on the left-hand side, the left-hand bar, that is 11 million recordings. Now that's 11 million recordings, which represents the entire meaningful output, well, not necessarily meaningful, but commercial output of the last 100 years of the music industry. That's what's available to buy on iTunes, and there's no other collection of commercially available music that's bigger than that. But then on the right-hand side, we have another bar. Now, this bar is twice the size. It's 22 million recordings. But what created these 22 million recordings? Okay, so do you remember this guy? I don't know how many people in the audience will know who he is. This is T-Pain. He's a rapper from Florida. He's 25 years old. Those 22 million recordings were recorded in just a few months using his I Am T-Pain app. And again, I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but it's a music app. It uses the Antares Autotune, which is actually a tool that professional musicians use to correct their pitch. You might have heard it in something like Cher's Believe, but she used it in a creative way. Actually, most recordings, most pop recordings you'll hear may well have used Autotune in their creation. And the take-up of this was astonishing. In just 3 weeks, they'd sold 300,000 downloads on the App Store. It completely outsold anything else that week. It was including all of the other artist iPhone apps that didn't allow you to create, that didn't allow you to participate. And incredibly, this was something that had great resonance. The people actually used the app. On average, they used it for 66 minutes. So it's really not a flash in the pan. And again, any one of these pieces of recordings, they're not very good. It's just people singing into a phone over their own track or over one of T-Pain's apps. But when you stack up that number, when you get to 22 million, all of a sudden, I think this is something that is culturally significant. Okay, and it's interesting. I think to get our head around this, somehow we need to take a step back, and we're going to have to kind of really reevaluate like our kind of perception of music creation and what its meaning is. And I think this diagram is interesting. It really shows there's a blurring of the lines between consumption and creation. So throughout the lines between creation and consumption just slowly got further and further and further. It was a relationship where it was a one-to-many, so you had one creator and he was creating music for a large audience. But actually, with all this technology and this desire to create and this desire to share, we're moving to more of a many-to-many relationship. So you have many people creating pieces of music, but they're doing it for many audiences at the same time. And then what's really interesting, especially with the I Am T-Pain app, is that actually these things kind of complement. I'm not trying to say that this new wave of music creation is going to like outdo the other, the more traditional side of things. I really don't believe that's going to be true. There's always going to be a place for the professional music makers. There's always, you know, like most of the recordings on the right-hand side are never going to match the quality and the skill of the recordings on the left-hand side. But they coexist, and they actually create a really meaningful spot in the middle where music suddenly becomes massively participatory. Well, you know what I mean, it's up on the screen. I knew I was going to mess that up. And this has benefits for both. On the right-hand side, you've got these new creators. They're going to be drawing influences directly off the other side. They're going to be wanting to like make music, drawing influences from the songs of the day, people like the T-Pains. And in turn, T-Pain can use this to his advantage. It doesn't matter that these are amateur creations. This is something that, as an artist, he can really lead. He can be out there, he can be putting things like this and getting his fans to interact. And I think that's really important for the music industry to understand. Okay, so just to sum up, I really think that we're seeing a shift at the moment. It's a shift where we have this new generation of creators, and they really want to create, they really want to share. And with these new tools, it's easy for them to do it. And then when they do, it's actually the sharing that makes it meaningful. And I really believe that this is something that's going to be big. We're just at the dawn of this. This is still something that's, you know, we're still at that kind of 1877 moment. But hopefully you'll agree, it's a really exciting future. It's a future where everybody is a music maker.